the start because it's pretty wacky and it's pretty sad. Hopefully all of you are familiar with Mick Gordon. He's one of the most well-respected and most talented video game composers of our time. You might know his work from Killer Instinct, Doom most likely. I absolutely love his work. I always compare him to like Hans Zimmer in the way that if his name is attached to a project, you know that that soundtrack is going to be slapping. And of course, Mick was brought back on board by id Software to be the composer for Doom Eternal. Fans were pumping their fists, sodden, sopping panties, everyone was excited, and it all seemed fine until the Doom Eternal OST released. The original soundtrack. So the OST is different than the game scoring, and when the OST came out, everyone was surprised that it just really wasn't good. Like, it wasn't well made, it was sloppy, and Mick Gordon's got no blemishes on his report card. This is a straight A student. His whole resume is nothing but hits. He's never had a miss. Until Doom Eternal's OST. Most people were criticizing it heavily, and then out of nowhere, Marty Stratton of id Software dropped a Reddit post that blamed Mick Gordon for why the OST wasn't great. And this Reddit post came out of absolutely fucking nowhere, like a jump scare, and it pins the entirety of the blame on Mick Gordon, makes it seem like he's hard to work with, lazy, doesn't do what he's supposed to do, and this is the accepted perception of Mick Gordon for 2 years. 2 years ago, Marty Stratton dropped this, and for 2 years, people believed it, which of course had a wildly detrimental impact upon the reputation of Mick Gordon. Most people used him as an example for talented people who were lazy, and that's just the way people perceived Mick Gordon from that point forward, and he never came forward to defend himself until last week. Last week, Mick Gordon came with an over 14,000 word thesis, a fucking Harry Potter book worth of evidence to disprove that, saying that that Reddit post was misleading, factually incorrect, and downright fucking wrong. I'm not exaggerating the scope of this. This report here, it's not a twitmonger. This is a goddamn twit novel. Like, it has its own table of contents, and he has printed more receipts than a Walmart. Mick Gordon came with an overwhelming amount of evidence to prove his side of the story, and it highlights a lot of fucked up things in here about what happened behind the scenes. There's so many layers to this onion, it makes Shrek shit himself. It's wild. And it really seems like Marty Stratton has a personal grudge against Mick for some reason. I don't understand why, but it really feels like Marty fucking hates him. I don't know if Mick Gordon fucked Marty's wife or something, but my god, it really sounds like Marty was twirling his evil mustache here in order to make Mick's life miserable with this project. Let me show you just a quick excerpt there before getting into the deeper stuff. So this is in regards to that Reddit post. So the OST, it was a poor quality release which drew criticism. Marty asked Mick for assistance, and they eventually came up with a couple of ideas. So he offered to draft a joint statement addressing the situation and announcing plans moving forward, and requested that Mick hold off on making further public comments until they could address it together. And Marty then told Mick to expect the draft in a few hours, but it never arrived. Instead, what arrived was a fucking tank of dog shit. Instead, days later, Marty put on the fedora and wrote his infamous open letter Reddit post, which blamed Mick for everything, with the botched OST. So that's the level of respect Marty has for Mick. And that's really just the beginning. Get ready to have your heart broken here. Awards. I'm happy to hear Marty feels I deserve Doom's music awards, because the truth is those trophies are kept locked in the id Software office. I've only ever seen them once, behind glass, from a distance. Nobody has ever offered to send me copies, and thanks to the show's producers, I was invited to perform at the Game Awards, but other than that, id Software never invited me to collect the awards in person. Marty invited himself to collect the awards on my behalf instead. It would mean a lot to have a memento of all the hard work I poured into Doom franchise, but as it currently stands, doubt I'll ever see those awards again. So Marty, being the saint that he is, didn't invite Mick to claim his own awards, and instead invited himself to claim the awards on Mick's behalf, and then never sent him the trophies. I don't know why he hates him so much, I don't get it. Now before diving deeper into the bowels of this filthy colon, let's go ahead and go through some of the summary of facts that Mick Gordon provides here. So he still hasn't been paid for over half of Doom Eternal's music, which is fucking criminal. That is a massive, massive problem that he has still not been fully paid for his work. The Doom Eternal OST was announced with his name attached and made available for pre-order before Mick was even contracted to produce it. and despite Mick's alarm and constant appeals, Marty refused to do anything about it, which led to a 9-month delay. And after 7 months of inaction, he reported his concerns to Bethesda, and Bethesda and him negotiated the Doom Eternal OST directly without Marty's involvement, and he received the contract for this just 48 hours before Doom Eternal was released. The delay was announced a week earlier before he was under contract, and the deadline was 29 days later. This is really only the tip of the iceberg. Things were just filthy with id Software and Bethesda and how they treated Mick. One thing that I think is very important to note is they attempted to bribe him into silence. According to Mick, they allegedly offered 6 figures in order for him to not come forward with his account of this situation. So one of the reasons it took him so long to come forward with all this, not only because of the length of it and how in-depth he went, obviously that takes a lot of time to get all of those ducks in a row, but another reason that there was such a long period between that Reddit post and this, 2 years, is because they kept trying to legally scare him and intimidate him. So there were lawyers involved that would constantly just kick the ball down the field, hoping to keep putting this off, because they knew Ragnarok was coming. They knew Mick Gordon wasn't going to stay silent. He didn't accept the bribe, so all they could really do is try and stall for as long as possible. And that's just one of the reasons that it took so long for him to come forward. They tried to legally strong-arm him and bribe him into not coming forward, which clearly didn't work, and I'm glad Mick Gordon's coming forward because this is a really valuable look into some super shady shit that I'm sure isn't the only time it's happened in the industry. So Mick Gordon calling attention to it and highlighting it, breaking it down, I think is beyond valuable, and it's so great to see Mick Gordon come forward with an attempt to clear his name, and I think this is perhaps the best defense I've ever seen on the internet. This is like a professional S-tier rebuttal. Like, it's actually wild how much evidence that Mick presents here to disprove everything Marty was claiming. When you look at Marty's post in comparison to this, it's laughable. It's written by a clown. There is no evidence to support any of Marty's claims. Meanwhile, Mick Gordon has 14,000 words full of receipts to support his side of this whole thing. Now, you might be asking, how did the OST end up so bad? Well, it's because Marty and id Software passed it off to Chad Mossholder, who was an in-house audio engineer for the team, and Chad Mossholder took it on and produced less than stellar work. Now, I'm not here to critique Chad Mossholder's talent, and from the quality of the OST, I'm pretty sure he didn't put his best foot forward here. I'm imagining that he only worked on this OST while blackout drunk and pissing his pants and forgetting who he was, because it is so sloppily made. It is amateurish. I refuse to believe a high-level audio engineer actually worked on this in any meaningful capacity. This may have been Chad Mossholder passing this off to an intern so he didn't have to. I don't know. But it is terrible. Like, from an actual quality standpoint, it is awful. It wasn't Mick Gordon who produced this
8 minutes.
It was
7 seconds.
that forced
Sub done. That's nice. That's really nice, actually. Yeah. Yep. Okay. All while being able to watch YouTube at the same time. The worst part is, like, I go for like an hour with without YouTube, without anything, and the second I turn on a YouTube video, like literally the first YouTube video I turn on, I get a sub 9 run. I just get slightly above an 8-minute run. But yeah, that's cool. GG.